it's really cool to create something kind of from the ground up. I find that to be the most rewarding because I just don't want to alienate anybody, especially like the previous actors that have done a legacy character or the audience. You know, it's tough. No, not everybody's gonna. Nobody will all like it, and no one will all hate it. But like, I prefer to just do things from out the box that I thought of. You know, it's safer.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another installment of Jam More Interviews. I'm your host, Josh, aka Jam More, and today I'll be interviewing the voice of Cliff Jumper from Bumblebee, Bruno from Call of Duty Black Ops 4, Rev Knopf from Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, Louis Sauer fame for World of Warcraft, whatever, Fuego from Destruction All Stars, and tons of other amazing and multi-layered characters. Can I please get a rounding round of applause for the amazingly talented and humble man, Drew Morgado? There we go.
Yo, there we
Okay.
go.
How you doing?
I'm great, man. How are you?
I'm doing phenomenal, sir. Thank you so much, man.
Took me a second. Old guy here. Old guy checking in. Am I on mute? Oh, Jesus.
I'll let you know. I'll let you know.
Yeah, seriously.
No,
You
but you're great.
call
You
me.
sound
Why don't you
phenomenal.
call me? Call me on the telephone. We'll figure it out.
But no, you sound phenomenal, man. And just before we get into the questions and stuff, I would just like to say it's a huge honor and a humbling experience to be able to speak to you today. Thank you so much for giving me some of your time today. I truly do appreciate it. A huge fan of your body of work, and just hope to have an amazing and make an enjoyable experience for you. So thank you so much.
Joshua, my pleasure, man. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for reaching out. I mean, you do all the work, dude. You built this thing, you're promoting this thing, you're self-made. I love that stuff. We all, kind of come from a place of self-made, lore. So it's my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, just a little bit before we get into the questions, I have my questions, of course, but with a lot of the times with interviews, you never really ask the guest, what are they thinking? So my first thing for you is, what's on your mind? Here you can literally talk about anything you want. You can talk about the food you just ate. You can recommend a show. You can talk about something that bothered you that you want to get off your chest. You can literally talk about anything you want right here, right now. The floor is all yours.
Wow.
The power is in your hands.
It's a great way to set it off. God, way to put me on the spot, man. No, I'm just gonna go with current events, man. Not work related. I'm a father. I have two daughters, and I have a daughter who is 13 going on 14. And I don't know if any of you young people out there have experienced this, but the pandemic has been hard on younger people, especially kids who are kind of coming into their own. Going through that tough period of, kind of transitioning from kids into teenagers, into young adults. And, she is no exception, in that way. She became a young lady in lockdown, basically, and has, kind of had to deal with all the little things that are kind of going on with, growing up and the hormones and the brain stuff and everything that goes along with that. And, she's really just been stuck with school, and, God bless her. She, has taken on a lot school wise, and, has been really tough on herself. She's the opposite of me. I was a disaster as a teenager. I did not study. I did not participate. I was a mess. I mean, the fact that I'm here, discussing this with you is a miracle, really, because, I was not on a good trajectory to begin with. And, she really is, and she takes this stuff really seriously, and she's in AP classes, and today she found out that this huge algebra test that she freaked out about for weeks, she did really well on. And not only did she do well on it, but her teacher wrote us an email. This hard-ass teacher. This is like a person who has been really just cold and just, yeah, she's just, almost to the point where as a parent, you want to remove your child from that environment because it seems almost hostile, But this battle axe of a woman, wrote this the sweetest email I've ever got. And it literally changed the trajectory of this little kid's holiday. As a result of being praised for something where she was convinced that she was no good at this and she hadn't learned it. But not only did she learn it, she did really well, And it took me 30 years to understand that idea that maybe I don't know everything. You know, maybe the things that I assume about myself when it comes to my strengths and my weaknesses, maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe I didn't give myself enough of a chance to see if I could push through and come out the other side when I had to go through the hard stuff. And she did that. I don't know. I mean, you know, and I'm just super proud of her today, you know, and any kids who are going through that, you know, if I could go back to my little self or any of you, I would say, you know what, just give yourself a chance to get through it. You know, I think at her age I would have quit, and I think I would have regretted that. And you don't know what you don't know, you know, and so once you know, if I never strived as a kid scholastically, you know, which I didn't, you know, I never ever got that feeling that she got today. You know, I didn't get that so much later in life when I, you know, did hard stuff that was, you know, work related. But anyway, that's what's going on right now in this moment. You know, I was just I had a nice little moment where I got to see someone's little eyes light up because they did something hard, and even though it was scary and stressful and it made her mad and it made her feel less than, she did it anyway, and she got a really good result. You know, and you know, I was impressed by that. So.
That is so badass. Can we get a clap? Can we get a clap? Y'all stop playing. Can we get That is so awesome. Oh my God. I can relate to that heavily. Of course, like you said, you know, the pandemic started when I was in the middle of my junior year, and junior year was kind of going to be a redemption sort of high school thing for me because sophomore year was terrible. I'm not talking about grade wise. I'm talking about socially wise. Because I had joined this group. This is a short story. I don't want to take away from you, but just a quick thing.
No, man.
I joined this Discord group because I was a huge fan of this YouTuber. And I was just this starry-eyed little kid dealing with high school, you know, trying to make friends there and hang out. But then in the Discord, it was these grown men telling me to, like, kill myself. I was fat. My voice was off. And I was just going through it in sophomore year. And then I was trying to, like I said, try to make friends with people in my grade. And that was becoming a struggle. I was trying to relate. I was trying to joke. And then people were kind of resistant to me. So junior year was going to be that redemption arc, and kind of going into senior year, it was a little difficult, to be honest. I mean, I've been away from people for God knows how long, many months. How they started senior year was really interesting because they like split us up into groups. So like one group would go like Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then another group would go Tuesday, Thursday, and then Zoom. I hate Zoom. I hate Zoom. But we would do Zoom classes, and I'm not paying attention. I'm not an online student. I'm sorry. Neither is my little brother, and I can't wait until they send them back to a physical school, because just like God, like online is just, it's so mind-numbingly hard because you're just staring at something and sitting in a chair for just ever, and you're just trying to pay attention, and sometimes, you know, it's just difficult because it's just you're not in person, you're not talking to someone, you're not can't really raise your hand and ask a teacher questions. You have to raise your Zoom hand and be like, hey, I got a question. It's really different. So that is amazing to hear that you really got that experience, man. And I'm just like really happy for it. That's phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, thank God. You know, I really got to give it up to kids who are going through school right now. I never had experienced anything like what kids are going through with virtual learning and everything that caused. And I was, you know, I could never have gone through that. You know, I'm a very hands-on learner, and even then I didn't really participate all that much. So it's like, you know, to see kids who are able to somehow keep that together and still push through stuff, especially kids that had to do these, you know, these hurdles to go from like, you know, elementary to middle in the pandemic, middle to high school to college. I mean, oh my gosh, you know, like, I mean, these are huge life milestones that these kids are getting through. And, you know, I don't know how they're doing it. I mean, power to everybody who's sticking in there and participating, because, I mean, it would be real easy to walk away from that, you know, I'm sure.
Yeah, so some kids when we went back for my senior year or whatever year it was, like kids would skip school because attendance wasn't as heavily enforced as it was. Because I mean, if you're sick, don't come to school. You shouldn't come to school anyway if you're sick. Like I don't know why.
Right? Yeah.
What is you doing sick, coming to school, getting sniffles all over it? Like, because I would know people would come to school and I'd be like, dude, you guys like, no, I'm sick. And I'd be like, dude, get away from, get out, leave. Stop coming to school sick. You're making this worse. But anyways, kids would just like skip school like crazy because attendance didn't count. Usually they would come to school because your attendance counted for exams and stuff. But nowadays it was just like attendance didn't really matter, so kids would cut class like it was nothing. So yeah, it is much easier for
Yeah, that
people
would have
to
been me. I mean, I would have definitely. I was the kind of kid that exploited every angle of getting out of things. So I can certainly relate to that. You know, if we had a free pass, all of a sudden attendance was sort of off the board for a year. Woo! Oh my gosh, that would be that'd be quite an off-campus year for me.
Definitely for a lot of my friends. But let's go more into your childhood then. My first question to you is, what is one childhood experience you have that you would say perfectly defines you as a person that you are today?
Perfectly defines the person that I am today.
You're digging deep here.
Yeah, so I was raised in northern New Mexico, way out in the middle of nowhere. It's funny that I would have a career in sort of entertainment and TV, video games, animation, these sort of things. Because I actually, even though I wasn't like born in the dark ages, but just based on like who my parents were and kind of their ideals, they were like readers and music people, and they wanted to be hippies out in the middle of the desert. And so I didn't even have a TV until like the early 90s. Like, so, I mean, a lot of my, my retreat was in books and records, and tapes a little later. So I had this sort of antiquated upbringing, even though like it didn't, I was born in the 80s, but I had a lifestyle that was very much like being born in like sort of like a Dust Bowl type existence. Like we lived on this little farm, and like we had our own well and grew our own food, and it was it's so funny. It's like what everybody's like striving to do now, like because it seems super cool. No, it wasn't cool when I was a kid. This was a nightmare. All I wanted was a Twinkie and a Sega Genesis. Like that's all I wanted. But I mean, I had the kind of mom that like tried to make Cheetos herself, like in the oven, like with cornmeal and like cheddar cheese. Like it was not cool. But as a result of that, I did a lot of reading as a kid. I mean, that's all I really had, that and imagination and music. And so I did a lot of replaying of things. My parents had these really old records that were, there's a thing called Thimble Corner, which was like a 1960s sort of, it was kind of for kids, but it was kind of for adults that were taking LSD at the same time too. And it was these two guys that did all these different voices. And they did all these really trippy, strange voices. And I used to listen to them all. I'd play them over and over. I'd memorize every one of the songs and all that. And my mom's from the UK. She's actually from Scotland. And so I was exposed to like things like Monty Python and Faulty Towers and things like that. I promise I'll get to the answer to the question here. So that just gives like a little bit of a background. And the big emphasis that my parents had was not on things. Things were not of value to them. Travel was of value to them. And when you're in that as a kid, I think that all I really, like I said, all I wanted was a Twinkie and a Sega. But what I got to see the world from this sort of pressed off center perspective. Like we never stayed at resorts or hotels. We would drive our old Volkswagen bus to like to Costa Rica, and spend months there. They would take me out of school, and I would, learn the local languages, and they'd immerse me in local schools. And, one trip in particular, my father, who worked as a physicist at Los Alamos Lab, which was the place where they actually developed and built the atomic bomb in New Mexico. He got a sabbatical where he got to go teach physics wherever he wanted. And my dad's from Hawaii, but of Portuguese descent. And so he wanted to go back to Portugal, and he wanted to teach at a university there. And so he did that. And he took me and my little sister there, and I was like 12 and she was like 8. And I just remember being so resentful of that at the time because, like I was almost starting to come into my own, and I was starting to have a little bit of a social life, and I started to really value friendships over anything else. And I was sort of like just plucked out of that and plopped down in this foreign country and just sent to this Catholic Portuguese school where nobody spoke English. And I remember being very sort of angsty and resentful for that at first. And it turned out to be, this touchstone 18 months in my life. I mean, my wife always jokes with me. She always goes, there is seldom an interesting thing that you say that doesn't begin with, when I was in Portugal, and I didn't even realize I did that. She calls me on that all the time. Like, despite what I felt at the time, that experience was hugely formative. I ended up making friends. I ended up joining a punk band called Euthanasia. I ended up like learning to play an instrument. It was the first time I ever used my voice outside of just talking to people, like, and I got some of my first performing that I ever did. I remember thinking at the time, I'm just trying to get through this and get back to my normal life. But, in retrospect, it was this invaluable experience that certainly shaped not only like who I am today, but, how I approached parenting, and also how I approach anything that's sort of difficult. And, it was a good lesson in like, you might be wrong. You might be wrong. I mean, that would be the name of my memoirs. It's just because when you're a kid, you think you know everything, and then the rest of your life after you're a kid is unlearning that. Is basically being like, no, I was wrong about that. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about that. And looking back on that, so trying to give my children something similar to that. I mean, certainly we don't do what my parents did. My kids have every gadget known to man. But definitely travel and new experiences that are sort of a little bit off the beaten path, I think is invaluable, especially when you're little. And that was huge for me.
That's something I've always wanted to do, is just more travel, because I didn't do too much of that as a kid and just experience the world more. The only place I've been to as a kid was like Florida and Disney. Only the most memorable experience I had from that is getting food poisoning for the next week. So that didn't really teach me nothing, just not to eat so much. But it's
something.
Yeah. But that's amazing that you get to do that, and that you got to go through that as a kid and got to experience so much and get to read and really get to perform and be in bands and do all that stuff to really make you who you are and make you this amazing performer that you are today, man. I really mean that. You have a lot of talent, and a lot of the roles you do are just so different. They have deep, absolutely. They have that deeper resonance that you usually have for characters, but they're just so vastly different from one another because of the way you portray them, the cadence that you put with them. And that's really such an amazing talent in and of itself. And I feel like a lot of times voice acting isn't given its due credit, because some people are like, oh, voice acting, that's Looney Tunes, you're just making funny voices. Well, no, it's really like talent. There's a lot of work and effort that goes behind being in a cartoon or in a movie or in a video game or dubbing, and the list goes on and on, or radios or commercials, or like the list goes on and on and on of what voice acting pertains. And it's really important that you guys get your due credit, because it's very important, because like I said, each role you do is just so vastly different because of the amount of work and effort you have to put into that. So that's really amazing that you learned that and are comfortable with your performances and stuff like that from that experience. That's really badass, man. That's really cool.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's a lot of it is not, I don't feel like I can take credit for a lot of it. I mean, I think that it's somewhere along the way I learned that you can never be too prepared. I don't walk into things blindly. In fact, if anything, I over prepare, because I want to prepare every angle, whatever anybody wants. I prepare the thing that I think they want, and then I prepare the thing they think they don't want, just in case, I have to present something else. Like, and I think there's insecurity there, and there's fear about being accepted, being good. There's like an imposter syndrome that I fight with a lot. I mean, when you start getting into this stuff, I mean, for me, it didn't come fast. I ground this out for years before I finally got good representation, who learned who I was and learned what my strengths were. And, they took an interest in a trajectory for me. And then they did a great job of finding me things that suited me. And then, but even better, giving me stuff that I thought I wasn't good at, and then grinding it out, not letting me submit stuff that maybe wasn't quite there, I remember I moved out here right around the same time Ashton Kutcher did. I remember that. And I remember, I got on a motorcycle and I headed out of New Mexico, and I came to California with nothing, and I remember he right when I moved here, that 70s show had just hit. And I remember hearing him on the radio and him saying, like, it was like within a week of coming to LA, he read for that and he booked it. He was off and running. And I remember being like, oh my God, like this guy, and that was not my experience, like but you know what, along the way, I wore a lot of hats. I had to figure out a whole lot of other things. I worked in sound, I worked as a PA, I got people coffee, I cleaned up Foley stages, I cut audio, I ran tapes from house to house, and every one of those things in some weird way absolutely shaped who I was when I was ready to, become more of just get into more performing stuff, and, not have to have 3 or 4 careers sort of running simultaneously just to like keep the lights on. And so there is that moment where all of a sudden you're now performing for a living, and there's this like, oh my God, are they going to figure out that I'm just some weirdo from New Mexico that, like has a lot of insecurities and body issues and like all those weird little corners of our mind that we think we're going to take to our grave, that actually those things end up to be the greatest things to draw on, and when you find people like my agents and managers, or like, some, the casting directors and people I've worked with that really like to exercise that and figure out who these characters are, and really don't let you slouch, and kind of find that. I mean, that's an incredibly rewarding thing that, happens a lot in voice acting, I mean, especially because we have to draw so much on imagination, I don't get to dress up and carry the gun and be in the environment and just have all that inform it. It's very much, what's happening between your ears is kind of painting the picture for you. So it's, it's interesting. I mean, it's a big team effort, I think for every actor and in any discipline, it's the people you have around you that have been encouraging you and helping you too.
Absolutely. That's very important, to have that team and people who are just going to catch you when you fall and really lift you up off your feet when you're like insecure about something, or when you're just like, oh, damn, I didn't do this. And they're like, no, it's good. And they really push you into this great performance. And like you said, it's very collaborative. There's a ton of people that go into it. And voice acting also is really cool because there's not a lot of ego here that you hear with like music or like on camera acting. Every voice actor I've talked to has just talked about how nice and supportive a lot of the people are, from the casting to directors to the actors themselves. One story I like to talk about is Steve Bloom was voicing Shockwave in a Transformers video game, but at the same time, David Sobolov was doing Shockwave in Transformers Prime. Bloom got word of this and called David immediately and was like, hey, Shockwave, I got this thing at Shockwave, are you okay with it? David squared it off with him first before he even took the role, and then he was more comfortable accepting it. So I just think that's amazing to hear stories like that and to just see how nice you guys are to one another, how supportive you guys are. That's really important, not just for acting, but in any profession you take. That support is really, really important. And I don't think a lot of people understand how important, especially for the arts, because of course there's that imposter syndrome, that feeling that you're not doing well or that you could perfect it more, this perfectionist aspect of it. So it's really important to have those people in your life to really help you with, like I said, not just acting, but any profession, period. That support really.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that. I think it is an incredibly supportive community, I really miss that. I don't, a lot of what we do is in a bubble, right? I mean, I'm like, there's a couple of things that I do that are ensemble casts where we all work together and we all read, off each other when we record. But that doesn't happen as much as as I thought. I mean, or maybe that's just kind of where I'm at. But so a lot of stuff you do alone, and a lot of times you don't cross paths with your your peers and the people that you're working or in shows with or games with. But what you do have is like, these hallway meetings, like where you run into people that are like, they're there for one thing and you're there for another thing, and you get to see each other real quick. And, I just did this Comic-Con thing, and I saw Fred Tatasciore was there for a second. I saw David Mitchell, and I forgot how much I missed just seeing these people I look up to so much, and just seeing them around. I mean, we don't have to talk shop. We don't have to say anything. It's just seeing each other like briefly was so nice. And that was something that I really took for granted before the pandemic happened, because now this, what you see me in, I mean, I'm in this box. This is the booth, like I'm in here so often that, you really miss the human collaborative. Even, I mean, again, we don't have to be all in the trenches together, but just like seeing each other in the lobby, the green room, in and out, going by, you really do miss that, but I mean, people have, I did all of Cold War from this box, every single thing, and the people like the writer, who does that, Craig,
Houston.
Houston. Yeah. I mean, this guy was, he's one of these guys who cares so unbelievably much about his story and your part in it. And he's there for every session. I mean, I can't say that for most every project. I mean, like that's someone who is at hands on, and, it's people like that and that completely lift you up and, really carry you through these things and really make things clear and you know your place in it and are just encouraging. And it's really cool. And it's been weird. We all got weird. There was times when, a lot of these, voiceover sessions would turn into therapy sessions, really. Like you realize you hadn't recorded one line, but you were just talking about stuff that probably you would never have talked to each other about if we were on normal, just seeing each other in the studio. Hi. It was very topical. So in a way, the pandemic stripped down a lot of our like exterior walls, and because we didn't have anybody to talk to. And so when you start talking to people, all of a sudden you're bringing up fears and worries and things like that you ordinarily wouldn't have done in the workplace because it just didn't feel like the time or place. But now we were so, starving for contact that, it kind of enriched the relationships a bit, which was, it's a funny way to get there, but it's certainly a silver lining,
How have you adjusted to it going into like 2 years into this pandemic now?
At first it was really, I really loved it. Like not certainly not the pandemic, but like, I loved the isolative nature of it. Like I really work best by myself. At least I thought, at first I was like, oh great, I can just be in my head with my thoughts. And, I was really excited about not having to travel anywhere because I just wanted to be in one place. And, I really, I didn't think about the effect that it would have that I can't see, where like, if I'm in a box for 10 hours a day, eventually there is going to be a mental health deterioration that goes along with that. Even if like, I'm not a prisoner, like nothing bad is happening to me, but just like just being in a confined space for that long, day after day after day, I found that I was becoming like really impatient. I was quick to anger. I was, like I got a little upside down there for a while, to be honest, lately, especially, where, opportunities that would normally be exciting to me, like I would get good news. And then rather than thinking like, wow, this is a great opportunity, my mind would say like, no, that's not going to work. You can't do that. They're taking advantage of you. Like my mind started to become extremely pessimistic, and I had to really have like, I know that there's a lot of like buzzwords right now, but I mean, I really had to have these gratitude checks. Like I had to like start to talk to people about like, to keep myself right sized, because like after a while, there is a Groundhog Day nature to it that, and certainly look, I get to make believe for a living, right? Like I am not an essential worker or none of those absolute heroes of this planet right now that have, the people that have continued to deliver our mail and work in our hospitals and our doctors' offices and just all of those essential people. I mean, again, I got off so lightly, but, at the same time, a cup of sorrow is a cup of sorrow. And I think that, relatively, like I was getting weird and I needed to start like talking about it with people to stay grateful for all the things that are good, and all the silly little things like, oh, I don't have to go in traffic anymore. Those things really fell away quickly, and kind of, I just don't think it's that healthy to be, in your own head for that long, no matter what. Like it just eventually there is a deterioration that happens, especially if you're like, off being like, the devil's assistant for the morning, and then becoming like the Lego Masters guy for like, 10 minutes, and then becoming like an orc for the afternoon. I mean, like you start to really lose the plot, of like who you are, and because it all happens within the same little box. And yeah, I mean, your brain and your subconscious, it doesn't understand why you're like, I always joke with Fred and some of the other people that do creatures, like our bodies don't know that we're not being chased or murdered. Like, like it's just like, what, we were just sitting, and then all of a sudden we were lit on fire, you know, or like whatever thing we're doing vocally, you know, like you get the same endorphin rush and like, you know, your brain just must be like, what is happening? One minute we were having a latte, the next minute we were being like, you know, skewered, you know, alive. You know, it's a very, very strange job that we have. And, you know, doing it all from a box in the pandemic has been, it's been different. Yeah.
Has it gotten a little bit easier for you? Like, are you more comfortable? Are you more, has your mental health increased and gotten better as you continue doing this?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, you know, it's caused me to have to look at that a little bit more, you know. I thought I was like bulletproof. I didn't think that was going to be, you know, like most guys. I'm just like, I'm good. You know, until all of a sudden you kind of have to, you know, because like I was like, you know, like my little kids who don't, you know, they don't have any real life really yet, you know, like they don't really have a lot of responsibilities outside of school. But these little people were like raising their hand and saying, hello, I heard that my friend is going to therapy and they're talking to someone. I think I'd like to do that. We were like, what? Who says that? Like, I don't know. Most adults that I know, or at least, you know, growing up on where I grew up, you know, aren't saying that, you know. And these little people were like, hey, I think it might be beneficial for me to talk to someone, an adult that isn't my parents. And I was just like, wow. And they did that, you know, my kids did that. And eventually I had to be like, you know what? I think I want to talk to an adult that isn't me, you know, like about stuff that's, that I might be worried about. And I don't want to like, you know, you know, freak my wife out or my close friends, like, you know. So I think it got mental health into the conversation probably more than ever. And I think that's probably a good thing. You know, it's, you know, I think it's been a kind of a stigma for too long, you know, that we all have a little bit of something all the time. And if we're not looking at it head on, what are we really doing with it? You know, we're stuffing it down and eventually it will materialize in some way, you know, even if it's just in small cynicisms or negativity, like it's got to do something, you know. You can't pack it away forever. As Danny DeVito always says in Always Sunny, it's just like, stuff it down with Brown. And he's just like pounding whiskeys, you know. So, you know, ain't gonna do that.
Good, man. And I'm really glad that you have come to that conclusion. I really want more people to take mental health seriously. I'm a huge mental health advocate. Like I said, I've been through a lot, especially like 2018 was bad. When my grandmother passed and then my father passed and then, you know, my own depression and anxiety and having to really face that, because it is really important. And I noticed how it would affect me. Like even now currently, you know, I could see that, like, quick to anger or just like really annoyed by a lot of things, and that's because I'm not speaking about it. And I really need to, because it's extremely important, because I really want people to understand that like this stuff is serious. Like you can't just like stuff all these emotions down, because it'll come back even worse than the first time it was when you first dealt with that. So it's really important to deal with that. I'm really glad you had that sort of like aha moment. And this pandemic has really taught that for a lot of people, is just to like really have a conversation. Of course, the pandemic has increased suicide numbers, which is so heartbreaking to see, man. And
yeah, it's really gone up a lot. Yeah, especially in young people, man. Like, yeah, it's like double. Like, it's crazy. Like, try to get a an appointment with a psychologist, and I mean, they're months out. You know, I mean, they are absolutely slammed because people are, and it's a good thing that people are getting after those appointments. People are getting after it, but I mean, we need more people, you know, in that field, because I think it's just gonna be more of a thing. You know, the more that we're open about this, the more it's gonna need treated. You know.
Absolutely. And I'm very interested to see, after everything is said and done, however long this pandemic lasts or whatever, like what's next. You know, I'm very interested to see that, and hopefully it's a positive. Let's hope for the best. Let's keep that optimistic mindset going. Let's put all that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this will forever be like a thing, though. You know, I mean, I think you know, especially the younger kids. There's going to be like a generation of like COVID kids. You know, that there's going to be some positives to it, but there's definitely going to be some some
Negative.
repercussions, you know?
Yeah.
Like I remember I joked in the beginning, I was like, this is going to be like Y2K. Like, I doubt, you didn't live through that, but you know, where I came from, we were like stockpiling water. I mean, we were ready for the world to end when it switched, you know, on December 31st, you know, of 1999, because we were convinced that this world of ones and zeros was gonna, you know, it was gonna all crumble. I mean, like people were like digging bomb shelters in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Like, I mean, they thought this was it, you know, and you know, no, everybody just had a hangover on January 1st. That was about it, you know, and we just continued living. And now we look back at it like, oh boy, what did you do at the bomb shelter? You know, like it's, but I don't think that's the case here. I think that this has been an eye-opening thing that's, you know, and I think it's been great. I think that thank God we have games and animation and entertainment. I think people have stayed very connected with content. I think content has been the savior of a lot of people's sanity, you know, is, you know, and through the communities that grow out of, especially gaming, you know, and, you know, people who are, you know, fandom and people that are in, you know, groups that, you know, all have common interests. I mean, we've all had to, you know, sort of move to this virtual format. And, you know, I've certainly made like a lot of friends that I never would have met otherwise, you know, like you, for instance, you know, I mean, you know, I've met a lot of great people that were born out of what are we going to do in all this time that we have in our homes, you know? So there's some positives to take out of it for sure.
Absolutely. Well, let's go more into the positive. You've been in this industry for a long time, but I want to go back to the beginning. How did you get started in voiceover?
All right. So I always wanted to do voiceover. Like I actually didn't come out here to do on camera, and then it sort of became voiceover, which I think is a lot of people's track. So I had an oddly deep voice when I was a kid. And so, you know, between that and I was really good with accents and things like that. So I would parody trailers and I could really do good impressions as a kid. And people would just say, you should be that guy. You should be that guy. Like, you know, and I was like, I'm going to be that guy, you know? And, you know, I remember I came out here and I was just like, all right, how do I become that guy? And it was not that easy. I remember I took a class in Westwood, a voiceover class with this guy named Don Burns, who was like he was a smooth jazz radio DJ. And yeah, Don Burns on the wave, 94.7 The Wave. And there was like a little, I don't know, like in the last class they had like this, everybody put money in a hat and then everybody had to read the same copy. And then we had to blindly vote on who read it the best. And I won. And I was like blown away by that. And so I actually, he pulled me aside and he said, hey, you should get a demo made. And he gave me some people that I could go make a demo. And I went and made a demo with someone. And it would be like years before I'd actually do an actual voiceover, but that was the beginning of it. But what actually happened is after wearing many different hats and being a runner and a PA and you know, like I learned to cut audio, and I would make little radio bumpers that would kind of go like the little in and out of commercial. And I was learning to linear edit because like back then, you know, Pro Tools was out and it only didn't have that many tracks available. And so you kind of had to figure out how to do that. And I got a job at a sound house in Culver City as an intern. And I would shadow the ADR mixers, or the guys that are doing the automated dialogue replacement for features. And I'd show up early and I'd stay late. And I was sitting in on Hollow Man 2, which was the second installation in the Hollow Man films. And except with Christian Slater as the main instead of Kevin Bacon. And the guy, and there's this wonderful young director, his name was Fabio, and he was this really kind dude. I want to say he was Spanish or something, or Italian. And he was really, really inclusive to me. Like, even though I was just like the intern who was hanging out, like he just treated me like one of the team. And thank God for people who do that. I always try to do that with people that I see coming up now, because it's so important to feel like you're part of something. And he would watch me, and I didn't realize I was doing this, but I would learn the sync that the actors were doing, and then I would mouth it to myself. And I was doing it. He was sitting next to me, and I guess I was doing some voice. And he pulled me over at lunch, and he said, "Hey, I have this character that, like, he was played by a stuntman, and he's this guy who he was a hollow man. So he's been invisible for years. And we have this idea that, because you're invisible doesn't mean you're invisible to UV rays. And so his organs have been laid bare to UV rays for years, and he started to grow new cells on top of his, and so he's back to being visual. You can see him again because all the new cells have regrown and they're not hollow. So he's sort of like this big cancerous lump of a man that kind of like wraps himself all up and you can't see his face. And they had this stuntman play this guy, and he didn't have a voice that was very cool. And he was like, we need to find a voice for this guy. And you were doing a voice as a joke at lunch that I think would be perfect for this guy. And so that was my first voiceover job, is I revoiced this guy in Hollow Man 2. That got me like Taft-Hartley in the SAG, and which is, for people who don't know, is the Screen Actors Guild, which is the union you kind of have to join. And there's like all these catch-22s. It's like, to only work a union job, you have to be in the union. But like, how do I get in the union? You have to work the union job to get in the union. It's like, there's all this weird, like, and nobody really tells you how to do it. And, so that was my in. And like, I just knew that was a great opportunity. Like that job was cool, and it will forever be cool. But what was really cool was that it gave me the opportunity to join that union. And I took every little penny I had in my checking account, and I called my parents and I was like, I need a little bit more. And they gave it to me, and I joined. I just, because I knew that at least if I was in, then at least that door wouldn't be closed. Like at least I couldn't say no because I wasn't a union member, And and that was it. And honestly, you would think that things took off from there. No. I would do like, a couple acting jobs a year for a couple years after that, and that was it. It was a building. It was a real building. It was such an exercise in patience. Like I always say that if you had told me in the beginning how long it was going to actually take, I don't know if that's a pill I could have swallowed. Like, it was just living it and just every day, just taking each day at a time. And like, this whole thing is you don't book so much more than you do book, even like, I remember I read this interview with Ryan Gosling, and he was cast as the lead in something called The Lovely Bones. And he read the book and he took it super seriously. And in the book, the father is an overweight character. And so he would take pints of Haagen-Dazs, microwave them, and drink them a couple times a day because he wanted to just put on weight, because that's what he wanted to do for the character. He wanted to, do justice to how the character was explained in the book. And he showed up on set, and the director was like, "What has happened to you?" And he was like, "What do you mean? I've been heavily preparing for this role." And I don't think the director said anything to him directly at that moment, but within a few days, he was let go from the movie. And they hired Mark Wahlberg instead. And I always remembered that, because I remember Ryan Gosling talked about how he just went back home to his Hollywood apartment and was like, I blew it. Like, I totally blew it. Like, this was a huge shot. This was a big director. This was going to be a big thing. And I went with my instinct, and my instinct was wrong. And like, this could have been it. This could be the thing that, that does me in. This could be the thing that ruins me. This could have been the role that could have changed everything, And of course it wasn't. And of course it didn't. And none of his fears came, true. And in fact, he probably, I don't think that movie did too well. And like, he went on to be who he is, and thank God for it. And I always remembered that as just, those are always like those little touchstones that you remember when you don't book the 1,000th job that year, and you're just like, ugh, like, what am I doing? Like, there is certainly moments of self-doubt, but just kind of going one day at a time, the next thing you know, you're getting a little bit more, and then somebody likes you and recommends you for this, and then those things happen, and it's a little bit of a grind, but eventually, all of a sudden, you're kind of like a working voice actor in my case, or a working actor if you're doing on-screen, and you're making maybe a little bit of a living doing it. And that's really exciting, because, I don't know that like a whole ton of people get to realize that. I think a lot of really talented people get after stuff and they get crushed by disappointment or whatever, and sometimes it's too much to carry on, and somehow, again, through the people I met and the people who helped and the people who took time to answer questions and take you under their wing. Thank God for that. It's really the kindness of, Hollywood did not chew me up and spit me out. It just slowly took me in. Like every year they let me a little bit, they open the door a little bit more. So maybe one day I'll get in. I'm still at the threshold.
I've never heard that story. That's crazy. That takes a lot of willpower, really a lot of dedication to your craft and passion to just keep going. Because you're right, like sometimes that rejection or that no is just like really damaging. It could really be like, oh damn, I don't want to do this, or make you question or double cross, and it takes a lot of willpower to keep doing and going after. I remember this year actually. There was like a whole month where I was just trying to do interviews and I got no's. Like every single email coming back was no. I was like freaking out, and I was like telling my friends, I was talking to someone, I was talking to my friends, I was emotional, I was like so upset, I was angry, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, I think I should quit, maybe I should do this, I was like really like upset. And then one day I was like, someone that said yes to me, I was writing emails like, okay, well, let me write these questions out for this interview. And the email came my way, and it was from Steve Bloom. And he was like, hell yeah, I'll do it with you. He didn't say that exactly. I mean, more professional, right? He doesn't really know me, can't, but he said, yeah, I'll do it with you. And then after Steve Bloom said yes, then Yuri Lowenthal, then Mark Ralston, then tons of other people from just started to say yes to me. And I was just like, thank God I made it. Because if I would have quit or I would have stopped, I wouldn't be able to interview people like that. Or I wouldn't have been able to experience them for just a small amount of time or talk to them if I would have quit. Because when I tell you, man, I was freaking out. When I was like, I'm done, I was really there. I was like crying. I was like writing in my journal. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
why is this happening? I felt like I was doing wrong. I was like constantly looking at my YouTube. I was like looking at numbers, and it became addicting. And I'm still trying to break out of that, like looking at the numbers. Because in my opinion, it doesn't really matter about the numbers. It just matters about the people you've touched and the connections that you've made. And I appreciate that little 20 views, I guess. I'm not the biggest channel in the planet, but like still, like you said yes to me, and Steve Bloom said, and like a ton of these actors that have said yes to me, have said yes to me because who knows, but they said yes, so I must be doing something right. So it really comforted me in a time where I was just really uncertain. It was really that passion and that thing in the back of my head that was like, no, keep going. You just got to keep writing and keep trying to keep picking. So yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you always got to remember that. I mean, I will always say yes to stuff like this because I just remember, there was a few people like in the beginning that took lunches with me or showed me around a studio, or just, they just took a little bit of time out of their day for no reason. Then they just did that. And I remember like how much that meant to me, like that someone would do that. Like, and I remember thinking to my little self at that time, like, if I ever am in a position to do the same, like I will never say no to that. Like I will never say no to that because I knew exactly how that felt, and I knew how powerful it was. Like I could tell you every one of those lunches and where we went and what it was and what they said, and it was everything, and so I'm always happy to participate in stuff like that. Plus it's fun. I mean, you get to sort of have this moment of reflection and kind of, look back on like where you've come and where you're going, and kind of have it's like a nice little reality check, because I think it's tough. I mean, it's tough. Even you can also see, like, you hear about some people that are, in our industry that, like on more like, on the movie star side, that are really difficult and can be, and I think that those people are just, they're incredibly professional. They take themselves really seriously. And I think that it's really hard. I think they take on a lot of the pressure. I mean, like as the stakes rise, so does your place in them, And I recently watched that documentary Val, about Val Kilmer and what's happened to him, and he's just this, he's a very sick man now with recovering from throat cancer, and he doesn't have a voice anymore. And Val Kilmer that dude was a big deal to me. I mean, as a kid, Top Gun, I loved the movie Willow. Willow was one of my favorite movies, I mean, he was one of my Batman of my generation. I mean, it wasn't maybe the most lauded Batman, but he was still
Yeah.
Batman. You know, he was Jim Morrison, for God's sake. And this guy was sort of known as being a little difficult. But really, what it was, you watch this documentary about him, and you know, he was just so driven to do well and to do right by these characters and to do well by so the audience would enjoy. He took it so seriously that, yeah, I think maybe he might have stepped on some toes along the way, just out of his sheer desire to really, really perform at this level. And I think that, a lot of people who get that rap sometimes, I think that they care so much that they may have just forgotten some of their social graces, but really it just comes from a lot of pressure and just wanting to do well to their employers and to their audience and to the character and to the material that they feel this incredible responsibility to. So I always try to, I worked as an ADR mixer for a while, and I got to work with a lot of A-list people, and my experience with the people that were supposed to be quote unquote difficult was never that. They were always kind and helpful and doing their best to just be a worker on that day, even if their reputations preceded them. So I never saw any of that, thank God, not firsthand. So I think we're all just little human beings with, like, when we're incredibly sensitive. Some more so than others. I'm one of them.
100%. What? Yeah, absolutely. There's two people in us. I can't remember who said it. It was Ron Friedman, who made the Transformers 1986 movie. He was the writer for all of it.
I saw it in the theater.
Lucky, I hate you. I love that movie. You're lucky. Never got to see that in theaters. The first time I saw that was on a bootleg website. So
there you go.
But but he was like, there's a creator and a destroyer within us. There's someone who is just so kind and passionate and loving. Then there's also someone who is also just dark and really hateful and vengeful. And it's the yin and yang within ourselves. And sometimes when sometimes the lines get blurred. Sometimes the light goes into the darkness and the darkness into the light when we're doing things, and sometimes we don't even recognize it. So I believe it when you say some of the people that you work with that are quote unquote difficult weren't, because you're right. It is a lot of pressure. I mean, these are multi-million-dollar projects. There's a lot on set. There are deadlines and stuff like that. But in the same token, for voice actors, it's not really that different. You guys have deadlines. You guys have things to do. Casting is short for casting directors, and you guys are great. So I do get what you're saying, but at the same time, I see amazing people like you doing stuff like this or continue doing your work, and I'm like, well, dang, if they could do this, I mean, but on camera is a whole different beast too. So you gotta factor that.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I thank God I don't have to worry about what I look like every day as much. I mean, if that was another layer to it, I mean, that's tough too. I mean, I'm watching a teenage girl grow up. I watched her go from a carefree kid to all of a sudden so painfully aware of how she looks in photos. Like all of a sudden, like one day she was a kid, the next day she was like, she really disliked what she was seeing in photos all of a sudden, and it wasn't for any other reason than she just all of a sudden became very self-aware, and I mean, if you're constantly on camera, I mean, that's tough, man. I mean, that's not easy, a lot of people think that it's, oh boy, cry me a river, Mr. Movie Star, that kind of thing. But I mean,
I think
it's incredibly tough. I can only imagine.
I think we forget that these are people too. And
yeah,
I know
right.
you see the billion or the $1 million, but still, like, that million and billion, there's like a lot of pressure in it, and there's a lot of stuff behind it. There's work that goes into it, and there's people behind them who are not the best, making them make some not so good decisions, and you have that to factor in. And then that's still a person at the end of the day. They still have mental health issues. They still have to deal with meeting deadlines or not wanting to let people down or wanting to be the best versions of themselves. And it is a lot of pressure. And that's one thing that when I see on the internet bothers me a little bit, is that we're so quick to meme or make fun of
Yeah,
actors, you know, like,
I
and,
know.
and sometimes I think it's important to like take a step back and be like, well, this is a person too, you know what I mean? And they still have feelings and emotions about certain things, and this meme could have been taken from like a really traumatic thing they were going through, you know? So that's one thing I wish was more upfront, is that we really take into account that celebrities are people too, no matter what their job is, that they are people at the end of the day, and they still have feelings. They still go home and cry or have mental breakdowns. They can be happy, they can be angry, they can be a little impatient or a little rude. That's what humans are. We as human beings have very complex creatures. I mean, we do a lot of things. So I just think that's another thing to remember, is just, just be kind.
And there are some absolutely, there's such kind. I remember one of my first like celebrity moments was I got to meet Martin Sheen, and my little sister was going to college at UCSB, and she really wanted to go into politics. She wanted to work in DC, and her favorite show was The West Wing, and he was doing that at the time. And I remember I said, I met him, and he was so nice. And I said, Mr. Sheen, is there any way you might just sign a little thing for my sister who she wants to go into politics. She wants to work on the Hill, and she's in college right now. And he goes, sure. And he goes into his breast pocket, and he like gets out this wad of Post-it notes. It's just like I was like, okay. And he like starts like uncrumpling them, and he finds one that has like a little blank corner, and he goes, give me your name and her address. And he writes it down. And then he balls it all back up into a big wad and stuffs it back into his pocket, and he disappears. And I was like, oh, well, what a nice guy. He said, I'll send her something. And I was like, okay. Well, I didn't tell her that because I was like, I didn't want to make her excited. And then 2 weeks later, she calls me. This guy like sent her like a handwritten letter, like a signed headshot, like a shot from the whole cast with a bunch of different signatures. And then this letter personally talking about politics, because he's a real like kind of activist. He's so much more than just an actor. I mean, this guy does a whole lot of stuff in communities and all this. And I just remember being so floored by that, like, and the feeling that it gave her, and the feeling that it gave like this guy's chaotic bundle of Post-its somehow translated into like a really, really generous thing that he did for a person he'd never met, for a dude he just met for 2 seconds. Like, I remember being so blown away by that. Like how many times must this guy get hit up like that? I mean, how can that be part of your MO? I mean, that could be a full-time job, just sending things to strangers, like, but he did that, like I remember just being like so enamored with his generosity. Like, it was, yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible.
That's amazing. Now I'm going to transition into some roles that you've done, and the one that I first got acquainted to your voice in was Call of Duty Black Ops 4 as Bruno.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
a huge fan of that character. I'm a huge fan of Call of Duty Zombie Spirit. I like the zombie side of Call of Duty more so than the multiplayer and such like that, because zombies fanatic. I'm a big fan of the original 4. Rick Toff and Nikolai Dempsey and Takeo.
Yeah.
It was really a surreal experience to talk to Tom Kane and Steve, because they did those characters in the game. And your character is just so cool. He's got like this badassery about him. I remember there was this clip for, I think it was it was Voice of Despair. Yep, yes it was. This guy was stealing something, and everyone had Scarlett had a gun. Diego had a knife. Sean had I think a gun. And then Diego just comes up and his arms are up. No gun, no knife. His arms are just like big and muscular, like the freaking Hulk about to get something. I just remember laughing so hard at that, because like everyone has to have like a weapon. Everyone's just like, no, I am the weapon. Give me the thing.
Well, that guy, I mean, he's a legionnaire. I mean, this guy was no joke, right? That role was really, really cool, because you would think that it's funny. Again, just back to like, it's never what you think. Like, I always thought that roles that would be bigger would have like a lot of trials and tribulations before like you would win the role. And it's so funny. Like, sometimes I have jumped through so many hoops for tiny little things that have gone nowhere. and then other times, like, you just do one little thing, and someone hears something that just rings so true to them. And that was the case for that one. And it was really tough because for that one, I don't even think they gave me a script. They just gave me a poem in French. And that was the audition. The audition was a poem in French. And I was like really intimidated by that because I'm good with shapes and language, but I don't speak French, I mean. And I remember I have this really good friend, Christophe, who is from Mallorca, and he speaks French. And I called him and I sent him that poem. And he just sat with me on the phone, and we went over breaking it down, why it was written that way, what it meant, accent, pronunciation, until like I was off book and I could say the whole poem in pretty close. I mean, and the French, they don't mince words when it comes to like whether you're speaking their language right or not. Their language is hard as hell, and if your American mouth ain't used to it, then it's really tough to fake that. And he was like, no, yeah, Andrew, I think he's good. You can do it. It's good. And I was like, all right, cool. And I went and I recorded a couple takes of it in that Bruno voice, because at that point I just figured maybe like a deeper, grittier voice would be cool. And that's all it took. And they loved it. And I remember like the casting director was like, the minute we heard that, and honestly, the guy really doesn't speak all that much French. I mean, maybe like a little one word here or there, but like for some reason they had this genius idea to make that the audition, because they were going to find something in there, like somehow by doing that, like, rather than, having a bunch of battle cries or something like that, it was such a different way to find it. So that was cool. And I was very invested in that guy. I mean, he was one of the bigger, that was my first time in that franchise, and, yeah, that was a very, very cool opportunity. I mean, that's still kind of, we still have we're left with a cliffhanger with that Chaos crew. So, yeah.
Were you familiar with the Call of Duty Zombies brand before, or Call of Duty in general, before taking this role?
No. I mean, I knew of Call of Duty. I mean, that was, I mean, it was well known. But I was not, I didn't play a lot of video games. I was trying to I was like cutting sound and recording sound effects. Like I was just trying to make a living. Like I really didn't have a lot of time to have hobbies, and so I missed, I had a PlayStation 2, and then the next time I paid attention, that was so obsolete. I missed this huge swath of gaming, by virtue of just trying to find my way in this industry. So I knew of it. I mean, certainly its reputation preceded it, but no, I mean, I didn't know those guys. I didn't know the multiplayer storylines. I didn't know any of that, which I wonder if that helps or hinders. I don't know. I mean, if you talk to people on the production side, they're always really nice. They're like, do you play the game? You don't have to. Because they know that people want to say, what do you want me to say? Yes, I play it. Don't ask me any other questions though. So I came at it from just a character perspective. I didn't know where it came from or where it was going or what the implication was the zombies mode and all that. So no, I was kind of, I don't know, maybe that was attractive to them too. They were just oh, we have this total greenhorn, yeah, no, I was new.
Have you gone back and played it or played any previous CODs since then, or?
I've still never even played it. I've never even played it, if you can believe that. Yeah, no. I mean, I have never played a character in Call of Duty in my life. If you can believe that. I have little girls, I would love to. I have this fantasy that one day we'll be able to play some of the characters I've played, and you would not believe how little exposure I've had to the work I've done. It's almost embarrassing. Yeah, I mean, and it's not from a lack of wanting to. It's just I just don't have any outlet or time to, because you know what it is. The last time I played video games seriously, there was 4 buttons. Now I'm good God, this is flying a helicopter. There's so much going on. Yeah, seriously. I mean, like there's just a whole lot going on, and just like I watch people play, and the way that they jump through menus and like all their supplies and all their weaponry. I'm like, I couldn't even do that, let alone like it's intimidating as hell, actually.
I get that, but yeah, Call of Duty specific one is a very interesting one to come into because of just the different stories. You mentioned Craig Houston, and I think he worked on that one too, right? He worked on
Yeah,
Black
that's where I
Ops.
first met him. I mean, dude, and talk about like a class act. That guy like invited us to Treyarch. Yeah, like the whole cast, like the Chaos Crew, me, Courtney, um, Christian Lands, Courtney Taylor, and Nick Bahrain, who played the little guy, the little
Shaw.
drug addict. Yeah, Shaw. He was in South Africa, like shooting a feature, and so he was the one he connected like through speakerphone, but like yeah, we sat at this massive table and like did a table read, and it was like the coolest thing ever. Yeah, like I got like invited into the belly of the beast, and like Treyarch is so cool. Like there's just massive props and stuff. Just I mean, it's everything you would dream like a video game factory would be. Like did not disappoint. It was super cool.
Oh man, I can
Yeah,
imagine. I remember seeing a video they did with the original crew from the Black Ops One Zombies to Black Ops 4, and I remember just seeing some of the booths that they had, and them just talking about what the studio and describing, and I'm like, this is really this is cool. This is really awesome.
yeah,
Um,
man. I miss going places and doing that. Like always when you like pull up to some cool ass place and those gates open up and God, like sometimes they even have like your name like assigned to a parking place and you're like, I've arrived. Like it's super exciting. Like now it's just like back to the shoebox with you.
Well, hopefully y'all get to come back to some studios coming up. I know some studios in California are starting to open up a little bit with vaccination rules and stuff like that. So I hope more studios open up with of course there are needed requirements to keep everyone in the work environment safe with the filters and vaccination cards. But I would love to see you guys get to doing that again.
Oh yeah, you know what? I mean, voiceover. I think barring ensemble, there's always the option to go in. I fear that especially on the TV side, productions are getting a little. People have started to figure out how to make pretty good home studios, and they're starting to be like, why would we pay for like a professional studio when we can just record people from home? Like, it was a great workaround. I hope that the money savings isn't too delicious to, I hope that we go back. I mean, I worry about like people that work at studios. I want to keep them employed, like I will always try to go in if I can and if it's safe, because I don't want to make any job obsolete or redundant. There's these mixers and engineers and people who, I mean, they cannot get cut out of the equation. It's not fair, so I will go in whenever I can, as long as, obviously it's, because we all go in with one. I mean, you can go in and you don't have to interface with anybody. I mean, they just ask you for your height, your measurement, so the mics are all set when you go in, everything's been sterilized, you go in, you do your job, you don't have to, it's not like a film production where there are going to be people in your face. Like there's, makeup and hair and all these people touching you. And like, everybody needs to be in a bubble, so I think voiceover, we can get around that. It's certainly not as difficult. Yeah. So thank God for that.
But to talk more about like sounds and voices and stuff like that, what is your favorite line or battle cry as Bruno?
Somebody actually took this thing and made like a weird like remixed song out of it. I don't know where it is anymore. It got taken down off YouTube, but
Oh,
it's during the when we're in Delphi and we're in the center of the Colosseum, and I don't. Dude, this is one of these lines that I don't even remember saying, but apparently I said it. Somebody throws feces at my character from the stand, and Bruno says, "What does he say? Throw your shit at me! Fuck you! I put it in my pocket!" Like that. And I don't remember saying that. I don't remember doing that line. I don't remember that we could swear all that much, but someone found that line isolated it and like made like a techno song out of it. It's like put it in my pocket, like it was like hilarious. So that was by far. It's funny how that, you know, you always wonder, like, you're blasting through these things, like I wonder what people will like glom onto, you know, like, because he had so many things that were like probably way more profound. Like he got very dark and philosophical at times, but it's putting the shit in his pocket. That's what really resonated with the fan base. I put it in my pocket.
They'll talk about that line for generations to come.
You know, Joshua, I have done my job. I have left my mark on this planet. You know, I always wanted to be remembered.
Putting feces in your pocket.
Yeah.
But yeah, to speak about sort of that dark and philosophical side of Bruno, I know in the story, he, spoiler alert, but I mean, this game is like, what, a couple years old. He kills Shaw.
Yeah.
Like, he kills him. He turns into this dark side. Were you surprised by that twist, or were you like, oh, wow, oh, I knew this was coming, or like, how did you come across that?
No, I was really surprised by that. Craig and his team, you know, at that point, God, there wasn't much of a team behind Craig. Craig was doing everything. Craig always does everything. I think Craig has a good writing team with him now, but, you know, he really, that dude's way out front. Like, he's a genius. He is a tricksy little dude, and he decided that he didn't want to let anybody know. I mean, part of it is like, you know, how much do you want to tell the actors? Because actors make mistakes, especially actors that have a big social media presence, which is not me. But you know, they're fallible, and they might say something or do something that would give something away. So I think they purposely don't give us anything that's not need to know. But he purposely kind of wanted it to land for us kind of the way it would for the audience, which is rather surprising. So I don't even think I found out until the day of, or maybe the day before the session, that's the turn that it was going to go with. I mean, he did the same thing to me on Cold War too, with some of the other stuff in that game. Like, you know, I think it's a really cool way of going about things. You know, I think it keeps it fresh, and I think that, you know, the surprise and things like that can be very genuine. And like, you always heard about, like, you ever hear about like how, again, like, I keep likening myself to these like incredible on-screen actors. I hope it doesn't come off as arrogant. I'm not comparing myself, but I remember, like, you know, Kubrick classically treated oh God, I'm blanking on her name, the wonderful actress that played Wendy. Oh God, someone please write it. Anyway, that wonderful actress that plays Wendy, the director was horrible to her, like put her down and completely like crushed her soul for that entire production, because he wanted to get her in that place. You know, when she's all alone in that hotel, he wanted to isolate her. He basically did this to her, you know, and her performance was Shelley Duvall. That's what it was. You know, like really, you know, he enacted this sort of, you know, to elicit this response from her, you know. And I mean, she's an incredible actress. I'm sure she would have got there on her own. But I mean, you know, some people have these tactics to sort of, you know, allow the actors to have some organic reaction to things, you know. And Craig's one of those guys who does that kind of a thing. You know, he doesn't need to lay it all out for you. You know, he'd rather you come upon it the way that the audience would, you know, which is kind of cool. So yeah, no, everything was always like last minute. You know, I'm sure he knew about it forever, but we weren't let in until like right at the last minute. So
obviously, you brought this up. You said the story ended on a cliffhanger. If they were to go back to this story, is there anything you would like to see them do, or anything you want to explore more with this character?
Well, I mean, I feel like, you know, Bruno's story was just starting, you know. I mean, you know, this thing was revealed about him, you know, with the eye, you know, and you know, I feel like there was another, you know, we were just getting going there, you know. I think that I hope that, you know, like, if they ever came back, and I've not been told anything of the sort, you know, that it would be able to explore kind of his dichotomy of, you know, like, are we all evil? Are we all good? You know, you know, his thing was always he was just so eaten up with the past, you know, and I think that we all that's very relatable. You know, I spend a whole lot of time thinking about the past sometimes, you know, and woulda, coulda, shoulda. It's funny. My wife always says, whenever I'm gazing off, she always goes, "Oh, worrying about the wreckage of your future, are you?" And she's always right because I'm always imagining some like, oh boy, you know, next week, oh boy, you know, like, um, no, I think they would have gotten deeper into kind of who that guy is and his place in this world, which I mean, obviously I would love to do, but there's nothing I've heard about that happening. But boy, that would be exciting. I get a lot of questions about that. Like one of the few things I get asked about a lot is the Chaos storyline. Yeah, I wish I had an answer.
Hopefully we'll find it out soon. I mean, with Call of Duty Vanguard, they're kind of going into this mystic route, sort of akin to the Chaos thing. So I hope we get to see something with that, because I really do want to see that story continue. Even though I am an OG defender, I love the OG crew so much. I'm very pro. What is it, Primus? I think I forget the names. I'm a fan, but names I'm done with. Like, don't even. But I'm a
Right.
big fan of the original, like Dempsey and Rick Toffin crew. But that crew was someone that was a story I wanted to see more explored, because I knew there was more there, and I just it kind of sucks that it just dumped it to go with what they did in Cold War, which leads into my next question. When they brought you for Revnov, if I'm saying that right, did you think that
Ravenov.
was
Yeah.
Revnov? Did you think that was Bruno again, or were they just like, what happened there?
No. I had known for quite some time that sort of chaos was not over, but it was, as far as we knew, like this was not something that anybody was going to deal with for, like there was no plan. And so when you know, Ravenov, that's another really weird thing where when a game kind of starts up before they've done like some of their main casting, usually they want to get some press stuff going and they want to start getting some early promos going. And so I usually get hired for stuff like that. Like before, like I find my way into a character, like a main character, like I'll come in, I'll play like a couple of pilots, a couple of monsters, you know, I'll do some creature stuff. Like it's kind of like a utility role, you know, where you do a bunch of different little things. And people, like partially it's that they need to have this material, but partially they're also kind of like trying you out for stuff, seeing what you might fit. Like, do you have a direction in the new project? And one of the thing is they had this Russian, you know, they had this Russian character that they had read a lot of people for, and you know, the head, you know, Craig's boss hadn't quite, like nobody had kind of figured out who this guy was or like who he would be, and nobody really knew. And so this was one of these roles that like everybody was reading for kind of at the end of each session. Like everyone was coming in doing these utility roles, and then everybody would take a crack at this mysterious Russian guy. So I did it. I think I probably did it a couple times. And then finally, you know, I got the call from Craig and them saying that, you know, Corky, his boss, had reacted really well to my version of it, and that he could see this kind of going forward. And, you know, this is long before, you know, like I knew where the story was going to go and what it was going to be. And, you know, so, yeah, you know, again, like I was only fed little bits as we went. So it's like, this is one of those things that came to me and then became this much bigger thing than I could have expected. So that's kind of exciting like that. I mean, it's good. It manages your expectations. I think that, you know, when you're going into something that you're like, this is going to be a big deal, you know, I mean, that can get inside your head. I mean, I don't know if that's Craig and his team that do it that way. I think it's valuable though. I mean, because certainly I would be guilty of overthinking it, you know, or at least having some unrealistic expectations of myself or others. So no, it was good. Yeah.
That's great, and I'm really interested to see where the Call of Duty Zombie storyline goes forward, where they try to take it in. Of course, with Vanguard, they're doing their thing there, and of course, what you did in Black Ops Cold War. Of course, the ending with them revealing that Rick Toffin is still alive in some sense. I don't know if you saw that cutscene, but yeah, Rick Toffin is back. I think.
Well, this is where it's like another reality, right? Like where he was never German, right?
Yeah, it's yeah. I'm excited to see what they do with that. So
yeah, it's like a parallel reality. Yeah. I mean, the one thing that they always say is, look, we're not we're not saying anything's possible with these, with this storyline. I mean, never count anything out.
Absolutely. Well, now I want to go into a franchise that I hold near and dear to my heart, Transformers, and of course, you were in the movie Bumblebee as my boy
My
Cliff
name is
Jumper.
Cliff Jumper, Lieutenant in the Autobot Resistance. My safe return will be considered.
Wrong answer.
That movie is so great. Just the opening scene, it was such a breath of fresh air from The Last Night, which I cannot stand the movie. I'm very openly about my opinions about the Transformers movies are extremely open. I will not hold back. I will tell you what I feel about it. The Last Night, I think, is one of the worst movies of that year and worst Transformers movies. I was very upset with what Michael Bay did with that film. They were trying to bring in Unicron, and then they did a terrible job with that. And then we had Optimus Prime be in the movie Evil for like 5 minutes when they were trying to. It was a mess. And then when Bumblebee came out, it was just like the flowers and seeing the original designs from the cartoons that I love. Funny story about Transformers is that I remember my mom. I used to go to my mom's job at Citibank with her, and she brought me and sat me down and. I'm like 5 or 6, and I'm very energetic. Still, I'm very energetic. I'm moving around, bouncing. She's like, this kid has to sit down. I'm going to get in trouble. So she puts on Transformers, and she sits me, and she's like, oh, well, I loved this cartoon growing up. I was like, okay. I watched that. I immediately turned to my mom, and I'm like, Mom, I hate this cartoon. Turn it off. And then they announced that the Michael Bay movie, the 2007 movie came out. I love that movie. I still love that movie to this day. It's one of the best ones out of the franchise. And I went back to the cartoon.
That was a good one.
I consumed all of it. I just consumed the G1 cartoon. I have a great appreciation for it. I still cry when Optimus Prime dies in the 1986 movie. I still get emotional because that scene is just so well done and so well written. It's still screw Hot Rod for getting Optimus Prime killed. But that's another discussion for another day. But you just did such a great job as Cliff Jumper, and I really just want to congratulate you on that release of that role. It sucks that Cliff Jumper died because I would have loved to have seen them do more with that character. But
yeah, that's a weird thing. That was very exciting for me too. It was weird when I was a kid. I was more of a Mask fan. Like I had all the. Do you remember Mask? I mean, you probably don't remember it, but I'm sure it's been like. So Mask was another TV show of transforming autos, and they had there was a truck and there was a hot rod and there was like this helicopter, and and I loved Mask, but I remember seeing the Transformers in the theater and being blown away by that animated feature, and man, I mean, I can't tell you how cool it is to get involved in stuff that was so. It was like God, the size of it to you when you were a kid, and to be a part of it later in life there's nothing more exciting than that, I mean, I remember out by the theater where I lived, there was this cutout of Bumblebee that was it was massive. Like there's a picture of me standing in the Bumblebee, in the words, and I'm like this little person, and there's this huge Bumblebee, this huge cardboard contraption that they built. And I just took every time I saw a Bumblebee thing, I took pictures with it, and a couple of my friends were also in that. That was such a great opportunity. I mean, to your point, I kind of lost the track of the Michael Bay, what had kind of gone on for what was that? So had there been 4 at that point, and then Bumblebee?
There were 5.
5 and then Bumblebee, right?
Yeah.
So Bumblebee was I feel like it was a way to internally purge that, and sort of have maybe not a reboot, but just a refresh of just kind of remember kind of an origin story, just to kind of cleanse the palate there for a little bit. I think people that were really into heavy into where the other arc was going was kind of this is a silly offshoot maybe, and because it was a little more friendly and accessible. It was fun again instead of being so doom and gloom, which is kind of where we had gone with the other storyline. It's kind of the way Star Wars has started. Some of my favorite, and I'm sure this is not going to have any, ain't nobody going to going to be agreeing with me on this one, but some of the side stories of the Star Wars franchise I actually really enjoyed, and I thought it was really nice to just kind of get away from the main arc for a little bit, because it was just there's just a lot to process there. It was great to focus down and get granular on one character again, you know, and it was just fun to do that. And I think was what that was, you know. I think it attracted a younger audience again, you know, and it just made it kind of fun again, you know, which I think is maybe what it might have needed. And I get why maybe some diehard fans of it that take it really seriously thought it was maybe like a little too pandering to a younger demographic or whatever. And I get that. I mean, I've certainly been fans of things that aren't so diehard. Like I'm like that about music, you know, like I hate it when like, you know, bands that I love, like, you know, are you like, or better yet, like when you see like, you know, like seeing like a celebrity kid like wearing like a Morbid Angel shirt. I'm like, name me one song off that album. I dare you. You know, like, so believe me, I am not immune to like being like a super fan of things and wanting to take ownership of it. You know, I totally get that, like 100%. But yeah, I mean, I think that's what Bumblebee was. It was just like it was a palate cleanser. You know, it was like a whiff of coffee beans and an otherwise, you know, like in the Nordstrom's perfume section.
No, definitely.
Unpack that one, Instagram.
Yeah, definitely, and it's really cool to know that you watched some of the Michael Bay Transformers films. Where did you? What's the last Michael Bay one that you remember watching?
Well, this is going to sound weird, but it was the last one that Megan Fox was in because
You stopped at the second one?
Yeah. That's about as far as I got. Dude, I had little kids at the time. Like, you know, here's the thing. Like, the minute you start to have kids, like, those movies are done. You know, like, for me. Like I couldn't see them in the theater. And even back then, I mean, like, you know, things weren't as accessible, like, the way they are now. Now, I mean, people don't realize, I mean, how quickly things are becoming accessible in the streaming world. Like, even back then, we were still, like, you know, you'd have to wait for them to come out, and then you'd have to buy them somehow. You know, there wasn't really streaming services even back then. You know, I mean, maybe Netflix was around. I don't even know. But, yeah,
Netflix was selling DVDs back in the day instead of, like, streaming.
No, I'm like the Daniel Day-Lewis of voiceover, okay? Like, I show up, I do a job, and I go back to, like, mending shoes in Ireland, okay? I don't play the games. I don't watch the shows. I go back into my cobbler's hut and keep. No, I know people are always surprised by that, but yeah, no, I haven't gone that far.
Let's say, I mean, you're not missing much. It kind of gets very interesting. I mean, the second one was really interesting. I talked to one of the voice actors from that, Andre Soyutso, who does the voice of Sideswipe in the second one, and he was talking about how there was a writer's strike and how it was very interesting for him because he had to sort of do like anime dubbing for Sideswipe because he had animated, Michael Bay had animated, and the VFX artist animated Sideswipe before the writer's strike happened. And of course, with the writer's strike stopping, it didn't finish the movie. So they were like writing lines along as Andre was doing it. He was like throwing things at Michael Bay, and Michael Bay was like, and it was very weird. So a lot of the story for that movie and plot gets very, for the second one, gets very weird and starts to like feel off because of that. And
right, when did Wahlberg join?
That was the fourth one.
Okay, because I remember there was something going on there too, or right before that, where it was like there was all this stuff in Deadline about how like here we are shooting this like $100 million some dollar movie and there's no script. Like there's no script. Like we're just kind of just going through the motions. We're just getting through all these visual effects scenes because they either couldn't have a script or didn't have a script, or production was just slated to go forward and they had no story, but they were just going to do it anyway. You know, like it always like blew my mind that things could get to that point. Whereas like, you know, little filmmakers can't get like $5,000 to like make an actual like compelling little story. You know, it's crazy.
Absolutely. No, I think that was the fourth one because I think there was an interview done with one of the writers because there's a writer's room for the Michael Bay films. And a question was asked like, okay, so I'm going to ask you this question about this plot element. What inspired this plot element in the fourth Transformers movie? And the writer said word for word, I don't know, I just wanted to do it. What is that? What is that? He just straight up said, I just wanted to. Come on now. Like, seriously? So that's why I was really, really glad with how Bumblebee came out and how to see it all played out. I'm excited for the newest one coming out with he directed the second Creed movie, but the guy who made the second Creed movie is making the newer Transformers movie.
Oh,
God,
cool.
I hate that it got delayed, but I'm excited for that one because it's gonna bring in the Beast Wars, and I love the Beast Wars side of Transformers, so I'm
Oh,
excited.
that's cool. Yeah, it's funny the Transformers world because there's like animated stuff that's going on, there's video game stuff going on, and then there's the features that are going on. And so, most voice actors in town, dude, we've read for every Transformer like twice over at this point. I mean, like I've read for everyone, and it's so funny because they always say things like, guys, we want to go really organic. We know what Starscream used to sound like. We want him to be human, okay? Like we don't need these raging psychopath voices. And so you're like, okay, I like this, and then you give them like an honest read, and then you see the movie, and he's like, ah, Megatron. You're like, I knew it. I knew it. I should have just done the Starscream voice.
Yeah, and with Transformers, you need that sort of like chaotic, crazy energy because I mean, these are big, gigantic robots that have awesome voices, and I think that's what's my issue with what's currently going on with Transformers is just they want these natural voices and they don't sound great. I think about the guy who's doing Optimus Prime currently for the War of Cybertron trilogy on Netflix, and he doesn't sound good as Optimus Prime. He doesn't because he's trying to sound like Peter Cullen and he's trying to do it in a way where it's kind of like mimicking, but it's very bad and it's extremely forced. They're not like he's not doing what Peter Cullen does. Peter Cullen like does these things with the vowels of Optimus Prime that this guy doesn't come close to doing, and it's very
Right.
frustrating. To
Well,
hear
I mean that's a really hard thing. For whoever's doing this voice. I mean, I feel for people that have to pick up the yoke that is that large from someone who has set such an unbelievably huge and recognizable voice print, and eventually someone has to either pick it up or continue it, and that's not an easy job, man. I mean, that's a lot of pressure, and I'm sure he's getting direction that is directing him into exactly what you're hearing. I'm always like trying to protect other actors. I'm like, it's probably not his fault. He probably does it really well. It's just that they don't want.
I get it. No, you got to work with Travis Knight on this, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. That's awesome. Because I just want to make sure, because sometimes, maybe they don't get to work with them, sometimes they hear them in their ear, or you hear the director in their ear because you're not able to go with them. But I'm glad you got to work.
He was like jumping in and out of the age. So this was like at Technicolor, which is on the Paramount lot. And he was so funny. He was like flying in, like he was down behind the glass and he came flying in. And he like talked to me about like kind of what he wanted here. And then he'd go out and then he'd come flying back in. And he was like excited and into it. I mean, like that's the thing that's super fun is when, because sometimes, especially in post for voiceover, you run into people who have been on this project for years, and you've come on at the point where everyone's tired, everyone's broke, and everyone's had it. And they're just trying to polish the end of it, and you maybe don't get like caught up in the excitement that ignited the thing that got this whole big behemoth moving, but that experience was not that. There was just as much excitement on that day that I'm sure there was the day that the script was being, the first table read or whatever that looks like, so that's really exciting when you're working for people that are excited about it and your involvement, and that's the best. I mean, that's the best thing, It's always like feeling like just like, oh God, like nobody wants me here. I mean, like we have enough of that already. Like I can make that up.
If for some reason they were like, Drew, we're gonna bring back Cliffjumper, the All-Spark God brought him back to life, what would you like to see them do with this character?
Oh man, I mean, that's tough. I don't know enough about where we're at in the story right now to say that. I mean, like, I think that we have a great handful of these, really relatable Autobots, I think that's kind of like that's a lot of the great storytelling that I think it's helped with. It certainly has brought us far from the cartoon, which is, the idea of these beings, AIs being these relatable human characters that, if they don't think and feel, at least they can synthesize it to a realistic point, Um, I don't think that I'm educated enough to in that to say what I would want for him. I was brought into for this really cool little opportunity on that, and I don't want to alienate anyone or anything by saying something foolish. So I'm going to take a pass on that.
Completely understand.
I just want him to come back. I want him to come back and not have lost my number.
You've been in a couple beat 'em up fighting games, Mortal Kombat 11 and Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, as Venom and the Collector, respectively. Now I know that Venom came first before the Collector, right? Or vice versa.
Yeah, Venom was before the Collector. Yeah.
Did you gain inspiration from the Venom voice to make the Collector, or was that something you did on your own?
No, I actually didn't think of it. Actually, the Venom thing was that was one of those things that was like it happened like really fast. Like it wasn't there wasn't a whole lot of like figuring out. There wasn't like callbacks and all this thing. It was just all of a sudden they were just like, "You're hired. You're Venom. Let's go." And I was like, "Whoa, okay, great." That was I took a beating for that one, actually. I don't usually like to look in the comments of stuff, but people were not pumped about that version of Venom. I don't think. I had definitely done the homework and listened to what other people were doing for Venom. A lot of them were really heavily processed. And so it's really hard to know like what the actors did originally. Like I always want to like honor at least the seed of what they were doing. I don't really feel like, unless they're just like, we're completely reinventing this, which nobody said, this was just supposed to be, this is Marvel versus Capcom. There was no extra lore here. This was like we're just taking these characters from these two different franchises and throwing them together again, But, so I just kind of did to the best of my ability what my version of Venom would be while trying to sort of keep that bestial cool thing. It was really fun. I really liked doing it. I love that you liked that because I have not gotten a lot of positive feedback on that. I haven't dug around and looked for the negative of it. But yeah, I don't know. The Collector was great because, again, like, as much of an honor as it is to get involved in stuff that is like a legacy character, to be a part of something like that, even if you're one of many, is super cool, right? But it's also really delicious to just start something new, And the Collector, they were great about, NetherRealm is really great about getting this unbelievable artwork to you. And so this, he was kind of a version of what you know now, except he was carrying this lantern. He didn't have like it wasn't a lantern. It was like one of those frankincense things that like priests have in a Catholic church, and he had a hood on, and the dude looked badass, and because I listened to some of like earlier versions of Shao Kahn to sort of get an idea of like who would this guy hire, like who would this guy want as his sort of merchant of Venice, I tried something very what I auditioned with is pretty much what the voice became. I think we fine-tuned it a little bit, but they really liked the sort of the vibe that I brought for that guy. It's really cool to create something kind of from the ground up. I find that to be the most rewarding because I just don't want to alienate anybody, especially like the previous actors that have done a legacy character or the audience. It's tough. No, not everybody's nobody will all like it, and no one will all hate it. But like, I prefer to just do things from out the box that I thought of. It's safer.
These characters have like these scratchy, crazy, like high voices, like sort of like that. Have you ever passed out while doing a voice?
No, I have not. I have been around other people that have. In fact, my good friend Nick actually really like fell and hit his head once, like really badly on a stage once. No, somehow I have certainly. What was I doing? There is a big animated series that's coming out next year that I'm in. I can't say what it is, unfortunately, but
of course you can.
He has this wonderful little voice, and there is a scene where he's singing one of those like 99 bottles of beer on the wall songs, and I have to take this big breath and sing an unbelievable amount of copy in like a really quick amount of time in this very shrill, different kind of voice, and it like the world started to like vibrate and become like like a negative, you know, like where like all the colors are reversed, and like I could feel like the train coming, you know. But I eventually like I got through the whole thing, and I sat down right away, and I was okay. But no, so no, I have not fainted, but I've come right up to the threshold almost, you know, and kind of danced on that line. But no.
Gee.
But Fred Tatasciore and I always talk about that. We're always like, do you ever think like right before you get up and do a creature that this could be the stroke? Like if we go, I mean, because what are we doing? We're forcing all this blood up into our head. I mean, like some of us really go for it, you know? I mean, we've learned how to not hurt our voices, but we're still like, you know, we're really putting our body through something that our body doesn't, the most normal humans don't go through very often, you know, and you do it fairly regularly if you kind of get a reputation for doing these type of voices. And, you know, it's only so long before a little piece of protein dislodges in an artery and heads north, you know. God willing, that'll never happen. But I mean, Fred always jokes about that. He's always like, when I get up, like whenever we do ensemble stuff and we used to work all together, he used to be like, he'd be like, do you want to give me your wife's number? Like, like we might have to call someone, you know, like, because your body, that's another one of those things, like being in the box. Your body doesn't know. Like 1 minute you're just you're just sitting in a chair, and the next minute you're like a creature, like being like shot through space, like you're making the noise that thing would make. I mean, your poor like nervous system must be like, what the hell are we doing? Like, you know, frantically throwing levers to like, you know, minimize the pressure or whatever is going on. I mean, I always imagine some version of like, you know, that movie with all the little emotions in the girl's head.
Inside Out, yeah.
Yeah, Inside Out. But it's like the little voiceover dudes in the control room, like, all right, we've been speaking normally. Oh my God, what is he doing? And now he's fine. He's stopped. He's sitting down again. I will never understand this guy, you know?
One story I think about with Fred, he was doing an interview. He was talking about he was the Hulk, and he had to like scream super, super loud. And he was talking about how like he had to scream so loud that he passed out. And I think, no, he didn't hit his head. Steve Bloom hit his head when he was doing a audition for Spider-Man game. And Fred was talking about how he was like passing through the studio, and he heard Steve do a line or something, and then the next thing immediately after he heard like, and I was like, oh my God, like that's crazy that like it happened. Or Fred was doing the Hulk one time, and he just like he passed out. He was like, oh, and he's like, oh, and he like, if I ever get to talk to him, I want to ask him like, how often does that happen? Because that's a lot of pressure.
I hope not often, man.
Yeah.
I mean that's like like I always wonder if it's like, I mean, you know, these like repetitive injuries that, you know, football players are getting. Like, is there going to be like a whole slew of like old voice actors that are, you know, that like have these traumatic brain injuries from all these, you know, these creatures that they've done, you know, like this whole generation, people look at them and say like, oh God, they did it the wrong way. Now we do voiceover safely, but this other generation, you know, they really put their bodies through it.
They'll do it the tough way. You little kids.
Yeah, right.
It.
Yeah, everybody we all went outside and we smoked through it. You know, it wasn't a big deal.
Oh God, I can't. But now I want to get into the fun part of my interviews called Weird and Wacky, where you have 1 minute to answer a series of weird and random questions. No one's gotten to a series. No one has gotten to a record of 15 questions answered, although the current championship title holder is Simon Northley with a record of 14 questions answered. Do you think you could beat him?
No. I don't.
All right, well, don't say.
Wait.
What,
is there a time limit?
Yeah, 1 minute. You only have 1 minute.
1 minute for 15 questions?
But you have to answer them as fast as you can.
I was told there'd be no math. So that's 4 seconds per question? Is that? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hey, don't ask me. I'm almost failing math.
Oh, right. All right. We didn't go for school. That's right. I forgot.
All right, I'm about to start the timer in 3, 2, 1, least favorite food.
Tomatoes.
Favorite movie.
The Shining.
Favorite album cover.
And Justice for All.
Least favorite song on the radio right now.
Oh, God, there's so many. On the radio right now. All I Want for Christmas.
What instrument do you play?
Drums.
Dumbest thing you did as a kid.
Smoke cigarettes.
Favorite Star Wars movie.
Empire Strikes Back.
Would you rather be bitten by a dog or stabbed in the foot?
Stabbed in the foot.
What musician would you like to work with?
Maynard James Keenan.
Would you rather swim in garbage or swim in rotten milk?
Garbage.
Hey, time. 10 questions. 10 questions answered. You did great, Bill. That's usually the average, so you did perfectly fine. And
average.
Thank you.
Yeah, figures.
Well, before I ask my final question to you, I just like to say it's been so much fun again to talk to you and get to see more of your personality and really get to be entered into your life for a period of time. And I truly do appreciate this, and I hope you've enjoyed your time so far.
Absolutely, Joshua. Thank you so much, my man. It's been great.
But my final question to you is, if you were given a mic and the entire world can hear you, what would your current message to the world be during these current times that we live in? Obviously, we're living in a global pandemic. Laws are being changed. There's a lot of uncertainty going on. What would you say to people around the world?
I would just say be kind to yourself. I have not always been kind to myself. I am the harshest to me. Like, I would never speak to anybody the way I speak to myself in my head. And I've had to really look at that this last few years, because I've spent so much time kind of isolating, and when I forgive, my wife has this great thing that she always says, just be nice to little Andrew. Like that little dude, that little kid that, like, when I look at pictures of myself, like, I'm always like, what a sweet, innocent little guy, like, treat him the way, he's still here. This is him, and like I said, when we started this, I was talking about, like, kids that are teenagers now. They're so immediately so hard on themselves. I don't know why we as humans do that, where we learn that, or what that is. But just be nice to yourself. Because it's kind of like that thing where, how they. This is kind of an old thing that I do say a lot, but on an airplane, when they always say, like, when the oxygen comes down, you have to put it on yourself before you can help your kids, because if you pass out, you're of no help to them. Right. And if you're not good to you, if you're not forgiving yourself, and doing that, then how can you ever do that to others? Like, it kind of like starts here, and I think that, whenever I'm being hard on myself, I'm also turning that outwards. Next thing I know, I'm being snippy at those around me, like the dog's annoying me, like, everybody's annoying me, when I'm annoyed at me. So, I would say just be kind to yourself. It kind of starts there.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I'm trying to work on that myself, because
I'm
so critical of my art and the things I do as someone who is trying to become an actor and is starting to see more results from auditions I've done. I'm very critical of my art and how serious I take it, and I'm just very harsh on myself. And I gotta stop doing that, because it will get you nowhere. It's just really important to remember to be kind, and that's not only to yourself but to others, and that kindness starts with being kind to yourself. So do yourself that favor and just be more patient, be more kind. So yeah, man, that was amazing. Is there anything you want to promote before we head off? Anything plug, promote, talk about?
Oh man, there's so much I want to plug, promote, and talk about, but I don't know who's on here, and I'm always, like, I always err on the side of caution. I got a lot of cool stuff coming out end of year, and especially next year. I think they're all NDA'd up. I think I'm not allowed to say anything yet. I can't reveal anything. I take it really seriously, and then I find out nobody else does. Like, everyone else is like, what? No, I told everybody. I'm like, but yeah, no. Cool stuff on Netflix coming out. Couple of stuff on Cartoon Network coming out. Yeah, Nickelodeon stuff coming out. kind of all over the board. It's going to be 2022 should be a fun year. A lot of stuff I did this year didn't come out this year. A lot of stuff in the pandemic. I was very busy this year, but none of it has shown up yet. And I think it's all going to kind of drop next year. So next year will be exciting. So yeah, keep an eye out.
Awesome. Before we head off, can I get a shout out in the voice of Bruno? If you can still do it, or just do it in whatever character voice is easiest for you to do right now. We've been talking for a while.
Yeah.
Joshua, it has been an absolute pleasure, mon ami. And I will see you in the dark ether or somewhere else. Qui craint de souffrir, elle souffre déjà de ce qu'il craint. Au revoir.
Let's go! All right, guys, thank you so much for joining. I will see you guys on my next interview. Peace out, guys. Have a great one.
See ya.